This is episode 85 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Shawn DiMartile. I think I did it right?
Yeah,
Please
you got it right.
Thank you. We were just talking about it.
For getting it right, because that's one of those last names most people don't.
Yeah. So Shawn is a real estate investor with over 300 rental units, and he's only been doing it since 2018. Host of the Real Estate Takeoff podcast, co-founder of Takeoff Capital. His focus has been on apartment investing, and he is a Navy veteran. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on the show and for the opportunity to try to provide some value to your audience. I don't take it lightly. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I'm glad that we got in touch, and I'm excited to hear your story. I start in a variety of directions on this podcast, but I'm going to go with my OG question for you. When you were younger, did you have any interest in real estate at all?
No, when I was younger, that the thought of real estate or real estate investing never even crossed my mind because I didn't grow up with money, and I just felt like even just owning my own home was so far off that it really didn't cross my mind when I was younger.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because I feel like it's important for everyone who listens, new investors, old investors, or people just like with a fringe interest, like probably 70% we're at now of people who've been on the podcast who just didn't have any interest. So when did it come to you that real estate could be a thing? Because I know you were air traffic controller before.
Yeah.
Was it something where you were looking for auxiliary income and then it turned into this?
Basically, exactly that. Years ago, I finally got my dream job at the time, which was air traffic control, and I was making good, high six-figure income. And the thought started crossing my mind because my parents, grew up trying to teach me Dave Ramsey and everything. But I was like, man, I want to invest. Like, I really started to get interested in that. And really the catalyst was just a good friend of mine said, dude, you should check out the Bigger Pockets podcast. And maybe think about real estate investing. And it wasn't for like a couple of weeks that I was on a long road trip. And I was like, I'm going to kick on this podcast because I'm tired of listening to music. And I started hearing all of these stories of everyday people like PE teachers and, single mothers that were building real estate portfolios. And that was just a light bulb. And I got obsessed.
So what was the first investment that you decided to put the toe in that got you started?
So the first one, this is going to sound nuts to a lot of people listening to this, but my very first investment was a 32 unit apartment in Greenwood, Indiana, which is about 20 minutes south of Indianapolis. And in order to get that deal, I partnered with 5 other people, a mix of a couple coworkers, a couple people I met at real estate meetups, and on a joint venture. And I liquidated my 401k in order to participate in that deal and kind of jump in. That was my first deal. A lot of things went wrong, but we ultimately ended up doing really well and tripling our money.
Yeah, good. I'm glad that was part of it because I think you had everybody like nervous. It's like, okay, 4 partners, 5 including yourself, completely out of state, place that you didn't know, and then a liquidation of an account. What made you know before you did that deal that you were ready to go all in like that?
I think it was a culmination of a lot of things. Number one, I had been maxing out my 401k for about 6 years leading up to that, working my air traffic control job. And I was dead set on doing that so I could have a good retirement. Really, the change was the fact that I started to realize how much I was grinding as an air traffic controller and working, like I told you, the 6-day work weeks, and thinking to myself, do I want to do this to retirement age? Do I want to sacrifice most of my weekends because I was going to have to do that for at least another 10, 15 years. Do I really want to sacrifice all of that so I can have this kind of income? And I stopped really buying into the 401k over time because of just, and I won't take up too much time explaining this, but essentially, 401ks are nest eggs. I get it that, employers will match it oftentimes. But at the end of the day, you're capped on how much you can invest in it per year. So, I mean, you can only invest so much anyways. 2, when you reach retirement age, you start selling off your index fund shares or your bonds, whatever it's mixed in order to use that money on retirement. We all know, most of us do, that there's the 4% rule, yada, yada, on here's how you can try to outlive your money. Well, I started to realize with real estate, if you hold real estate and your real estate's cash flowing and you take care of that real estate, it's essentially infinite. You can pass that on to descendants.
Yep.
And over time, my cash flow increases. So I actually get wealthier as opposed to the 401k. I'm getting poorer if that's my only thing I'm relying on because I'm selling shares over time. So I started to think of all this and just to myself thought, if I want any chance of retiring before, age 60, 65, 59, depends on, when you retire, I have to do something else. And so I bought into real estate and I was willing to take the risk and jump all in order to
Yeah.
achieve that.
What helps you get out of the analysis paralysis stage and then into action? Because I think that newer investors, they really like pound data too much. It's probably because they're scared and they lack confidence. But what did you know about running the data that helped you finally get to the conclusion? Possibly it's the market because the numbers, you're like, oh, wait, this actually works.
I think for us, it was just knowing that we're going to be able to cash flow. If you're cash flowing quickly in a deal, it can be a lot more forgiving and you can, and just in a lot of ways, like if, as long as you can pay the bills, then you can make it out on the other side. Whether or not you're going to make a 3x return or just a 1.2x return, is going to be dependent on your ability to implement the business plan. But I think just the fact knowing like, okay, this is our first deal, we're going to make mistakes. Um, let's let's go ahead and move forward with this, knowing that we can cash flow this deal so that we can learn the ropes a little bit. I think that was for that deal what made me want to pull the trigger. And also listening to so many podcasts and starting to host our own podcast,
Yeah.
hearing so many other investors that came before us saying that you just got to get in there and get started. But nowadays, what prevents me from having analysis paralysis is that combined with being well capitalized. If you're not so worried about running out of money on the deal and you feel confident with enough contingency capital, it makes me so much more comfortable to move forward on a project.
Before we get into this interesting niche that we're going to talk about with ADUs in San Diego, one more thing on that deal. I like what you said before because you were focused on cash flowing, but for a lot of people, they're buying cash flowing deals that are like D neighborhoods, high cash flow, lot of deferred maintenance. You knew going in there's some deferred maintenance, low rents, but you looked at the data and saw like that's not a cash flow D. That was probably like a B minus or something or a C plus, right?
Yeah, I mean, this neighborhood was like a B plus neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah.
whenever, like the old adage in real estate, buy the worst house in the best neighborhood or the ugliest house, this was the ugliest and worst apartment in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
But when you can change a property, you can't change a neighborhood. Another old adage of real estate. A great location, if you can add a ton of value to a property in a great location, you'll do really well. I could go on and on about my thoughts on location and buying D-class assets and tertiary markets and all this other stuff. But I think that, there's a lot more risk, in my opinion, in a bad neighborhood, even if you got a good property.
Completely agree.
Good neighborhoods are going to appreciate better. You're going to get better tenants. The list goes on and on and on. And the cap rates swing less in good neighborhoods. I think that if you're listening to this podcast, yeah, you might be able to afford a class D property in a class C minus neighborhood, but that might not necessarily mean it's the best investment for you.
Yeah. And completely different management styles. D to C minus is going to be like much, much more. You're going to have to pay more and manage more. So you just have to know like what you're up for. Some people if you're really good at that, you're going to make a ton of money, in D plus class properties, but like you have to be good at it. You can't go in as a slumlord because the whole point is to help the neighborhood get better because then your long-term appreciation will get better as well without over gentrifying. But B plus, like you said, you're walking into something that sure, maybe it's kind of dumpy for the area, but that means everybody wants you to succeed. They want to get rid of when you buy the worst house on the best block, everyone's like, oh, like let's go. Please flip this house.
In fact, when we replaced all the second story balconies for this property, because this is a 1968 build, they were sagging and stuff. We replaced every single one of them. When the when the building inspector came to inspect and give the certificate of occupancy, he actually said that a lot of people within the fire department, his friends, and a lot of people in the neighborhood were talking about how happy they were that somebody finally came in and fixed that place up. So yeah, a lot of times you can make the community very happy from going in and doing something like that.